Hope you had a great weekend, everybody. But over the weekend, we got a lot of bad news, and that's not great. Obviously, Francisco Alvarez out 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hamate bone in his left hand, which is a little concerning because that is the catching hand. So he's got to be fully healed before he comes back. But it's not a killer for the Mets. I know the people are saying, look, you've got Manaea out, you've got Montas out, but the Mets aren't built on big-time starting pitching. You know, it's more their system, how they could turn people into good starters. Look at what Clay Holmes has become so far. He's been a revelation in spring training, so that could be a very savvy 3-year signing for the Mets where they get a really good starting pitcher for $13 million a year. Now, let's move over to the Yankees. It has been a seismic weekend for them. You know, one thing I've always tried to preach to everybody, whether I was on Yes or whether I was on our station. When he got roughed up, Gerrit Cole, against the Twins, we gave up 6 runs in 2 2/3 innings. This was on Thursday. Everybody kept saying, well, it's not a big deal because, you know, he had great velocity. That is the one thing that you should never look at. It should not be a concern whatsoever when it comes to velocity. Why? Because even someone with a bad elbow or a bad shoulder can generate velocity. The thing that happens when there's something wrong with you is that you cannot have any kind of location. You have no command whatsoever. And that's what hurt him in that game. He did not have command. So, you know, they talk about his fastball was sitting at a good spot, right where he wants it to be at this time of the year, topped out at 97, sitting at about 95. And when I saw him get hit, it's funny because Anthony Pusick and I were texting back and forth, and, you know, because he's got a dark humor and he's a sick guy, he said to me, when's he going to get the MRI? It just looked that he didn't look right, where he's a location guy. Despite being a power pitcher, that's why he's a great pitcher, because he generates velocity and can pinpoint his command. So all of a sudden, he's throwing balls out over the plate against the Twins, and they're hitting the ball out. You don't do that to Gerrit Cole. So he said he felt fine after the game. And it does tell you that he must have felt okay, because remember, they took him out of an inning. But in spring training, you could bring somebody back, and they did bring him back. They brought him back the next inning, and he got 2 outs, and then they took him out. Then he said he went to bed that night, and he had great pain throughout the night in the elbow, and we have not heard yet, but he is going to get a second opinion from Dr. Neil Elitroch, which is the guy you don't like to hear that your pitcher is going to visit Dr. Neil Elitroch. Not that he's a bad guy. He's a great guy. He also happens to be a surgeon, and this is his job. This is what he does. So when people go to see him, it's usually not good news. Now, you could say, well, last year he went to see him, and it was good news. Yeah, it was relatively good news, but he missed a full half season for the Yankees. Now, he came back, and he actually pitched very, 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 very well. He had a 3.41 ERA in 17 games started. And then, if you want to even take it further, he was absolutely outstanding in the postseason. 5 games started, 2.17 ERA. And even in that horrendous Game 5, he was almost unhittable. And the 5 runs that he allowed in that 5-run inning that will go down in Yankee infamy, they were all unearned because of errors and his error of omission not covering first base. But he was great in that game. Great. And the Yankees came up with a different program, so he didn't have this problem. Well, last year in spring training, he had to shut it down because he had an edema and inflammation in the right elbow. And I always fight with people about this. When you get injuries like this, when you get inflammation, and then they rest, and then they get better, well, I always go, well, something caused the inflammation. Something caused the edema. What was that? So they treated the issue, and they got the inflammation out, and they relieved the edema, but what caused it, and was it fixed? We don't know what caused it, and it wasn't fixed. But he did get through the second half of the season without any kind of problems. And as I mentioned, the postseason, it was great. Anyway, long, drawn-out way to get to this point. This is a potentially devastating occurrence for the New York Yankees. I'm sorry, it is. I am not one to sit here and put lipstick on a pig. So the strength of this Yankee team, when spring training began, and when I said I felt they were the best team in the American League, was their starting five. Cole, Fried, Rodon, Luis Heel, Clark Schmidt. Heel is out for at least 3 months, maybe more. Now, signs point that Gerrit Cole could be out all year. Hoping against hope that that's not the case. I love watching that guy pitch. Love watching him pitch. I don't know if he's going to be able to pitch this year. So Jim Bowden of The Athletic, former Reds GM, former Yankee assistant GM, he reported last night that Cole has been told that he's going to need Tommy John surgery. And he's looking, for a second opinion. Obviously, you don't want to get cut unless you automatically have to get cut. But with the injury last year, with all the innings he has on his arm, you hope that's not the case, but certainly that's where all signs are pointing. And boy, is it concerning. Boy, is it concerning. It's just awful. So now you've got a starting five of Max Fried's your ace, which it's fine. He served that role with the Braves. Carlos Rodon is your two. Marcus Stroman is probably your three. This is a guy who was on his way out. Now it's almost impossible for them to trade him. So forget about getting rid of that $18 million contract. They might be so dependent on Marcus Stroman that his 140 inning threshold is going to actually hit, and then he's going to be owed $18 million next year as well.